Hi. So, what exactly is logo animation, and why should you care about it? Logo animation refers to the process of bringing a static logo to life through motion graphics and animation techniques. With the help of engaging and dynamic animations, we can enhance the impact and visual appeal of a logo. Logo animation can be simple or complex, depending on the client's needs, desired effect, and the complexity of the logo design. Here are a few reasons why learning how to create logo animation can be beneficial for you and your client. By offering logo animation services, designers can provide a more comprehensive and valuable service to their clients, leading to greater client satisfaction and higher salaries. Furthermore, a well-crafted logo animation can help elevate a brand's image and create a memorable and engaging visual identity. This can help to increase brand recognition and customer loyalty. Overall, knowing how to create cool logo animations can help creative peeps like you stand out from the crowd, boost your tech skills, and make your clients super happy. Alright, enough with the talking, let's get started. Before we dive into animating logos in After Effects, don't forget to download the main folder of the course, with all the necessary materials. That way, you can follow along with me through the lessons. Next, let's talk about getting Adobe After Effects set up. It's a program made by Adobe, the company that creates some of the coolest platforms for creators out there. If you don't have an Adobe subscription yet, no worries, check out the PDF file in the main folder for a link to a free trial. Sign up for the trial and head over to the Apps section to install After Effects. After installing After Effects, head over to the Illustration apps and install Adobe Illustrator as well. Soon we will talk about this software and why we need it while dealing with logo animation. And now, if you already have an Adobe subscription, simply log into your account on the website or the desktop version, head over to the Apps section and install After Effects from there. And while installing the software, make sure to include the Cinema 4D plugin, because we are going to use it in the course. Make sure you install Illustrator too if you don't have it already. In this lesson, we're going to create a super cool logo animation for a made-up women's sportswear brand, named Athena. We'll be making 5 different animated scenes and then connecting them together. There's a lot to cover, so let's not waste any time and jump right in. Hi, and welcome to our first lesson. When we work on an After Effects project, we need to work very organized to prevent issues in the future. The best way to work on an animation project is to create organized folders on our computer. So, find a good spot on your computer where you want to create the main folder for the course. Great, and now, after finding a good spot, create a new folder. We'll name this folder DIM_logo animation. If you're using Windows, you can right-click on the folder and select Pin to Quick Access. This will make it easier to access this folder in the future. Now, let's enter the folder we just created and create 4 more subfolders. The first one is AE, where we will save all our After Effects files. The second one is Renders or Samples. In this folder, we will keep all the renders and project tests. Now, we need to create 2 more folders. One is named Assets, where we will store all the graphic assets related to this project. The second one is AI, where we will keep all the Adobe Illustrator files. In our case, these are the logo designs for this project. And since I already prepared the folders for this course, instead of creating these folders, let's go into the main folder of the course that you downloaded from me. Open it, and copy these 2 folders from there. Now, paste them into the folder we just created. Now, let's install the fonts we will use in this course. For this, open the Assets folder. Don't worry if you see more files here than in the lesson recording right now. I'll add those later. For now, just open the Fonts folder. I'll show you how to install fonts for both Windows and Mac users. Let's start with this font called Montserrat. Open the folder and go into the Static folder. For Windows users, select all the files, right-click. Click on Show More Options if you don't see all the actions, and choose Install for all users or Install. This font is already installed on my computer, so I won't install it again. For Mac users with Finder selected, click on Go. Now click on Go to Folder and type this line. Then press Enter. This will bring you to the fonts folder installed on your system. Now copy all the fonts from the course folder to the System Fonts folder. Okay, and now, let's go back to the Fonts folder and install another font called Ezra. Once you're in the folder, enter the OTF folder and select all the files. Right-click and choose Install for all users or Install. The last font we'll use in this course is called Belly, and it's only available on Adobe's Fonts website. So, let's go there and install it. Find the link to the font in the description of this video. If you don't have a subscription to Adobe Fonts, it's totally fine. I will tell you what font to use instead later in this course. So don't worry, you don't have to install this font right now. And for those that have an Adobe subscription, first, make sure you sign in. Then, just click on Add Family. And hit OK. Alright, so after installing all the fonts, let's head back to the main folder and open the AI folder. This is where we'll find all our logo designs and Illustrator files. Let's start with the first logo. So let's open it up to see how it is made in Illustrator. And now, to make it easier for everyone to see the same panel arrangement, go to Windows, then Workspace, and select Automation. Awesome! So, this is a logo I designed specifically for the course. Let's imagine that this logo is intended for a women's sportswear company. As you can see, this logo consists of multiple layers. We have this triangle, a background layer, a capital letter A, and the letters of the logo name, each separated into its own layer, which will be very helpful for us in the animation part. Every time you design a logo, it's better to try to build it in this way with all the letters separated. Alright, once we have seen the logo design, it's very important to plan the animation we wish to create. To do this, we can sketch out a quick development plan for the animation. That is, create a short storyboard. In order to see how the storyboard should look, let's navigate to the Assets folder and enter the Ideas for the Logo Animations folder. Now open the storyboard for this logo, and let's take a look at the sketch I made for this one. Making a sketch before animating a logo in After Effects is super important. It helps you to see and plan the overall design and movement of the logo animation. This way, you can decide the timing, movement, and overall design of the logo animation. It also helps your client to see the final result and make changes before you start animating. This can save you time and effort in the long run. In our case, I think adding the silhouette of Athena, from Greek mythology, would be a cool idea for our women's sportswear brand. She represents the values of empowering women and could symbolize what our brand is all about. Therefore, I want the warrior silhouette to be the first thing in the scene, followed by the brand name. Okay, I hope you understand the concept of how a storyboard should look. It doesn't have to be drawn at the highest level of detail. It's enough to present your idea in a sketch before moving on to the animation stage. Once you are satisfied with the planning, and the client has approved the sketch, it's time to start the animation stage. I hope you're ready, because this lesson is going to be awesome. So, let's close the storyboard, and open After Effects together. The first screen you'll see is the Home window. Here, you can either open a recent After Effects project you've been working on or create a new one. But let me show you the most common way to start a new project. So let's close this window for now. And now, so that we all see the same panel's layout, let's click on Default here. Now, as in any editing program, we need to open a new file. To do this in After Effects, we need to create a new composition. So let's click on New Composition and define the settings for our first composition. It's important to note that we can easily change all of these settings at any stage of the animation in the future. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is to give it a name. Let's call our first composition Logo Animation 1. Great! The next thing we need to do is to set the dimensions for our first composition. This is the dimensions of the width and height of the composition we create, which will be the size of the final video at the end. Different cases require different resolutions. As shown in the examples, a regular Instagram feed required posts to be 1080 pixels in width by 1080 pixels in height, but the new feed requires a height of 1350 pixels. For stories, reels, and TikTok videos, the size should be 1080 pixels in width and 1920 pixels in height. For YouTube videos, it's best to use a resolution of 1080 pixels in height and 1920 pixels in width, which is a full HD format. If you want to make a 4K video, you'll need to use full HD resolution multiplied by 2. This time, we will work in full HD format, which is 1920 pixels in width and 1080 pixels in height. Next, we will choose the number of frames for our animation. What is the frame rate? In the world of video and animation, frame rate refers to the number of individual frames, or pictures, shown per second to create the illusion of motion. Frame rate is measured in frames per second, FPS. The higher the frame rate, the smoother the motion appears. Most common videos and films use a frame rate of 24, 25, or 30 frames per second. But if you want to create an animation for an app or a website, it's better to work on 60 frames per second. When you work with video editing software like After Effects, you have the flexibility to choose the frame rate for your project. It's important to note that the frame rate can affect the file size of the final file. Also, higher frame rates require more storage space and computing power, which can slow down your workflow. In our case, we'll set it to 30. Moving on. Here, we will choose the duration of our composition. The first numbers here are representing the amount of hours. The second one is the minutes. This one is for seconds. And last one is the solitary frames. 30 seconds will be enough this time. We can delete the last frame. Finally, let's choose the background color of the composition. Let's set it to be black. To wrap things up, let's click on OK here and here. Great job! You just created your first composition. And now, I want to talk about the interface of the program real quick and show you around the panels, so you can get a good idea of how this program works. It might seem like there are a lot of buttons and functions, but don't worry. I'll explain everything in a way that won't make your head spin. Okay, so first things first, these are the active panels in the software. Let's start talking about this area here, called the project panel. Into this panel, we will import all the assets that we will use in this project, such as pictures, sound files, videos, etc. Now let's move to the Layers panel, where we drag the assets from the Projects panel or create new layers such as basic shapes, text layers, effects, etc. And now, let's move to the panel next to the Layers panel called the Composition panel. This panel shows us our timeline, in which we navigate using the time indicator. Here, we have the ability to move layers and time to schedule between them. We will also see here the keyframes that we will create later for our layers, those keyframes that make our layers move. Everything we do in these two panels will be shown in the Preview panel. This is where we'll see how our layers will look to the viewer. These three panels all work together. Next, we have the Main Toolbar panel. The Main Toolbar panel in After Effects is a set of tools and functions used for creating, editing, and managing visual elements within your project. It includes tools for selecting, moving, transforming, drawing shapes, creating text, and more. Alright, and now, let's talk about the final panel, known as the Workflow area. This section contains various functions and panels to assist us in working on the project. We can access a window to view the list of effects, choose the font we want to use, and many other helpful utilities. Awesome! Now that you know your way around the panels, I want to make a few important notes and give you some important tips to keep in mind while working with After Effects. If you see the preview screen like this, don't worry. It's probably because your caps lock key is on. Just turn it off, and everything should be back to normal. Next, when you're working on a project in After Effects, make sure you switch your computer's language to English. This way, all the shortcuts we use will work properly. And if you don't see the background color, then simply click here. Now, if you see the numbers here differently from mine, make sure to zoom out the timeline panel. Now, you can hover your mouse here, hold down the Control or a Command key, and click on the numbers here. These numbers represent the duration of our composition timeline. We can see it in frames or in seconds. Then, if you see the preview screen smaller or larger than mine, simply click here and select Fit. Finally, click here and change the preview quality here to full. Alright, so now, let's make some changes to the software preferences to make our workflow smoother. Just head over to Edit and go to Preferences. Mac users, you can access preferences this way. Alright, and now, let's click on General and start adjusting the software preferences. Now, set all the settings just like I did. You can pause the video if you need more time and continue when you're done. For now, I'm moving on to the next column, Grid and Guides. Change your settings to match mine. Alright, moving on to the Autosave section. In the Autosave section, we can choose how often the software should save our project automatically. Basically, this feature saves your work automatically at certain intervals, so you don't lose any progress if the program crashes or something crazy happens. I usually have it set to save every 5 minutes, but you can choose whatever time frame works for you. Next, in the Memory and Performance section, we can check how much RAM our computer has. It could be 16, 32, or even more than 61. If you want After Effects to run faster, you can give it more memory and use the rest for other stuff like surfing the web or running other programs. To make this happen, you must take some memory away from your computer. If you have 16 gigabytes, you can change this number to 6 or even 4. The main idea here is to lower the power you give to other applications, and by this, allow After Effects to use the rest of the power of your computer. Alright, moving on. Make sure that in Type, all the settings are like mine. And finally, let's go to Script and Expressions and select everything that's selected in my settings. It's important to note that you don't need to change these settings every time before starting a new project. Once we've set them once, there's no need to go back there again. Okay, so after we've created the first composition and defined the software settings, we need to save the project and give it a name. For this, let's go to File and click on Save. Now, let's find the folder we created earlier for the lesson. Head into the AE folder and name the After Effects file we are working on. It is important to understand that now, we are naming the After Effects file. Previously, we gave a name for our first composition, and not the name for this project. So now, we are giving a name for our project file. You can name it the same as the main composition and add an underscore, then write the name of the logo. In our case, it's Athena. Once done, save it, and our project will now have a name. And along with naming the project, we are also activated the autosave feature that we talked about earlier. This means that now After Effects will save the project automatically every few minutes. Alright, and now, it's time to import our logo into the project. We can do this in 2 ways, either locate the logo on the computer, and drag the AI logo file manually into the project panel like that. Another way to do it is by double-clicking on the empty area in the project panel. After that, we just need to find the folder we made for the course. Next, locate the AI folder, and select the first logo. Finally, make sure not to click on this function, and then click on Import. And now, a small window has popped up asking us how we want to import this file. In composition or footage form. Let's see what the differences are between these two. For now, please don't do it with me at this moment. I want to first explain to you the differences between these two options. Don't worry, we will do it all together shortly. So first, let's see which options are available to us when we choose to import it as a footage. I'll choose the Merge Layers option, and click OK to see what it does. So now, we can see the logo in the project panel as one layer. And if we drag this logo to our composition, we'll see it as a single layer with all its sublayers stuck together, which will make it not possible to animate the logo and all the layers from which is made. To undo my action, I'll press Ctrl-Z a few times. And now, I'll import the file again. This time, I'll click on Choose Layer. From here, I can select a specific layer from the Illustrator file. All the names we see here are the layers' names in the original Illustrator file. But in our case, I won't use this option, because I don't need to choose a specific layer. In our case, I want to bring in all the layers when they are divided into separate layers. And for this, I need to select Composition here. In other words, After Effects will import this file as separate layers into a separate composition. There are two options in this process as well. Let's start by understanding what it means to import the layers as document size. So I'll click OK, and as you can see, a new composition will be created, and a new folder will appear, with all the Illustrator file layers. And now, when I enter the logo composition, I'll see that the logo is split into layers, exactly as in the Illustrator file. The background, triangle, and letters are all different layers. Now, let's understand what it means for us when we choose document size. To help you understand this better, I will temporarily hide the background layer and the transparent background. I will select the triangle layer and hide the other layers as well. Now, pay attention to the boundaries of this layer. Even though the object on this layer is quite small, the proportion or the size of this layer is large. In fact, they are the size of the original Illustrator document. In other words, the document size. The same is true for this layer. The boundaries of this layer are larger despite the smaller letter. Working with document-sized layers is not so comfortable, because it will make it hard to animate the layers later on. Now let's move on to the second option for importing the file as composition, and see if it will be a better option for us. But before that, I will delete the folder and composition that were created earlier. I'll select them and press the backspace key, and click Delete. And now, I want you to do it with me. So, to bring the logo design into our project, let's click here twice, select the first logo file, ensure it's not highlighted, and click Import. Now, select Composition, and this time, let's choose Layer Size together, and click OK. And once again, a folder is created with all the logo layers and a new composition. Let's click on it twice to enter it. Here, we see the design of the logo again, just like before. But this time, if we select the triangle layer, we'll see that the boundaries of this layer are adjusted to the size of the object on this layer. The same goes for the letter A. It'll be way easier for us to animate these layers now when their size matches the object's size. Okay, now, let's go back to our main composition from here, and continue our lesson on creating our first logo animation. Alright, so this logo animation is made up of 5 animated parts or scenes. The first part is the animation of the character silhouette inside the triangle. The second is the animation of the letter inside the triangle. The third one is the connection and transition between these two animations. The fourth part is the animation of the letters. And lastly, in the fifth part, we will create the outro animation. Alright, first things first, let's work on the animation of the silhouette within the triangle, and we'll cover it in the next part of this lesson. It's going to be awesome, so see you there. Welcome back. So, as you can see, right now, our workspace is empty and we cannot see anything on the preview screen. To see something on the preview screen and start to create our first scene, we can either create a layer ourselves, or import a graphic asset from the project panel. Let's open the folder of logo layers, and drag the triangle layer into our composition like this. Alternatively, we can copy a specific layer from another composition and paste it into the main composition. Let's delete this layer and do that. So select it, and press the backspace or the delete key to delete it. Now let's go back to the logo composition, select the triangle layer, either from the preview panel, or from the layer panel. Press Ctrl-C to copy it, and return to our main composition. Now press Ctrl-V to paste the layer. Now let's learn about important tools and the basic layers settings in After Effects. You can close this folder for now. Alright, so first, let's learn how to center this layer in the composition. For this, we need to find where the center of the scene is. In this case, we can use the grids in After Effects, which we can find here. In our case, we need to use a grid called Title Action Save. But instead of selecting this grid from here, let's do it with a shortcut. Because we use this grid a lot, it can be annoying to come here every time and manually select this grid. Okay, so the shortcut for this grid is the apostrophe key. Let's click on the preview panel and press the apostrophe key. And now, we can see where is the center of the composition. Now we can move this layer manually by clicking on it and dragging it to a desired location in the composition. Or we can open the transform properties of this layer and change some parameters for different properties that we can see here. These are basic properties found in every layer in After Effects. To move this layer, we can change the value of the position property by dragging the values to the sides like this. We can move the layer left and right. And from here, we can move it up and down. Next, through the scale property, we can enlarge or reduce the layer. We can also set a specific value. For this, click the value and write 100. Then press Enter. Moving on. From here, we can rotate the layer by changing the degrees of the rotation property. I will set it back to 0. Using opacity, we can control the layer's transparency. And now, I want to talk about a property called anchor point. The anchor point, which is represented by the small cross in the middle of the layer. I will zoom in so that we can see it better. And now, let's understand its role. I'll close the zooming. And now, pay attention to how this layer rotates when I change the value of the rotation property. The layer rotates around its center. It rotates this way because the anchor point is located here. Now, I will select the anchor point tool and move it to this corner. And now, the layer rotates differently. It rotates based on its anchor point. Basically, the anchor point is what decides how the layer moves in response to certain actions. Alright, let's undo the changes by pressing Ctrl-Z a few times to bring the layer back to its original state. Set the rotation back to 0. And don't forget to switch back to the selection tool once you're done with the anchor point tool. And now, let's learn how to center the layer in the composition using the Align tool, which we can find here. If you can't see it here, you can find it under the window menu. Alright, so to center this layer, we need to click here and here. And now, let's say we need to enlarge this triangle. To do that, let's go to the scale property and change the value to 200. And there you go, the triangle is a bit bigger now. Let's close the layer for now. And now, let's zoom in a bit to see it up close. You can do it using the mouse wheel, or by pressing the keys you see now on the screen. Alright, now that we're looking at the triangle up close, we notice that its quality is not sharp, in other words, it's pixelated. Let's turn off the transparent background so that we can see it a bit better. And now, I'll explain how we can improve the look of this layer to its maximum quality. As you already know, this layer was created in Illustrator, which is a vector-based software. This means that no matter how much we enlarge this layer, it will retain its maximum quality and won't get pixelated. To preserve this information in After Effects, we can apply the collapse function, which is located here. In case you can't find it, you can click here to show additional layers functions. Okay, let's activate the collapse function. And there you go, the triangle is sharp and clean. Now let's use this opportunity to learn how to navigate in the preview screen while working with zoom like we are now. So, to move the screen, we need to hold down the space bar and move the screen in any direction we want. Or we can use the middle click on the mouse, for those who have it. And to set the preview screen back to normal, we can click here and select Fit. As a reminder, we are still in the process of creating the first animated part of the logo animation. In this part, we will show the character inside the triangle. It's worth noting that the silhouette of the female fighter is not a part of the original logo design. So sometimes, including design elements that are not present in the original logo design, can help us to tell a better story about the concept of the company. Nevertheless, it's essential to discuss any such ideas with the client before implementing them to ensure they agree with your ideas. Alright, now let's learn how to add this cool character to our project. First things first, let's open up the Assets folder. Keep in mind that our project is super organized, so make sure to follow the same structure to avoid any headaches down the line. Let's go to the Assets folder and find the FreePic folder. It's a cool website where you can get tons of graphic assets for free. I named this folder FreePic, so I can remember where I got the asset from. Here, you'll find all the assets I downloaded from this website. We want to open up the Silhouette folder. That's usually what you get when you download graphic assets from the web. Before we import the graphic asset into our project, we need to prepare it for animation. Let me show you how. Right-click on the EPS file and open it with Adobe Illustrator. If you get this pop-up, just click Yes. Inside the file, there are additional layers besides the silhouette that we don't need for our After Effects project. Therefore, it's essential to prepare this file before animation. First, select the unnecessary layer and press the backspace key to delete it. Then, delete the small letter 2. Now, let's make the character bigger. When you select it, you'll see another layer with a white background. I can tell there's an extra layer behind the silhouette, because I see large layers borders that don't match the silhouette size. Therefore, I know that there is some layer behind the silhouette that I don't need for my animation. So select it and click on the trash can icon to delete it. Click Yes to confirm the deletion. Now let's select the silhouette again and make it bigger while holding down the Shift and Control keys so it grows symmetrically. Great! And now let's center it using the Align tool. Click here and here. And now, after we've gotten rid of any unnecessary layers and enlarged the figure, we can save it as a new Illustrator file. So let's open the File menu and click on Save As. Now choose to save it on your computer. Let's save it in the same folder as this file. If you are not sure, you can go back to the FreePic folder and enter the Silhouette folder. Now, make sure we save it as an Illustrator file. Next, change the name to Athena Silhouette. And finally, click Save and OK. Now, let's minimize this window and bring the new Illustrator file we created into After Effects. Now let's choose how to import this file into our After Effects project. Remember, this Illustrator file only has one layer. Question: when we want to import an Illustrator file into the project, and it consists of only one layer, which option should we choose? In this case, we can choose to import it as a footage. Then, we can choose to import it as merged layers, because we only have one layer in this file. And here, we can see the Illustrator file in the project panel. Let's drag this file to our composition. Place it above the triangle layer. As you can see, this layer is quite large. Let's reduce it using the scale property. And to see only the scale property for this layer, we can select it and press the S key. Now let's click on the value and try to find a proper size. Maybe 50 or 20. Next, let's move this layer to the center of the composition to see if it's the right size. I think we can make it smaller and set it to 15. Let's leave it like this for now and move on. And because we know that this layer needs a scale animation later on, we will adjust the anchor point of this layer to the position from which the layer will grow, which is the center of this character's body. Currently, it's growing from the waist. Because the anchor point is here, we need to move it here. To do this, let's select the anchor point tool and move it here. Once done, let's go back to the selection tool and check how the scale behaves now. Okay, I think it's good. Let's bring it back to 15, close the layer, and press the shortcut Ctrl S to save everything we've done so far before we continue. Great, and now let's bring back the transparent background. We can also apply collapse to this layer to preserve its maximum quality. Now, let's learn how to make the character transparent within the triangle boundaries. To do this, we need to use an After Effects feature called Track Mattes. To see this feature, we need to click here. And here it is. If you can't see it fully, you can enlarge this area a bit by dragging the small line here. I will zoom in to show you the line you need to move. I'm talking about this one. Just drag it to the sides like that. Alright, so what is the Track Matte function? In Adobe After Effects, Track Mattes are a feature used to control the visibility of one layer based on the content of another layer. And there are two main Mattes functions that we can use: Alpha and Luma. Alpha Matte is a technique where you use the transparency of a layer to control what appears on the layer above it. It's often used when you want to create cool effects like revealing an image through the shape of other elements. A Luma matte is a technique that uses the brightness or luminance information of the matte layer to control the visibility of the layer above it. The brighter areas of the matte layer reveal the content above it, while the darker areas hide it. The grayscale values in between create varying levels of transparency. Luma matte is often used for effects based on an image's brightness. They help isolate and reveal parts of a video based on their brightness levels and can be used to create artistic effects. Track matte is a fascinating topic to explore. If you want to learn about them in detail and enjoy some engaging lessons, you can watch the free course I mentioned in the opening video. You can find the link to the course in the description below or in the PDF file in the main folder of the course that you downloaded from me. Alright, let's get back to our project. So to make the character transparent within the triangle boundaries, we gotta use the Alpha Matte function. For that, we need to drag the Track Mattes pick whip of the triangle layer to the character layer. This way, we turn the triangle layer into the alpha layer of the character. Now, the triangle uses the shape of the silhouette layer as a mask. And now, we just gotta make the triangle layer use the silhouette layer as a cutout shape. To do that, let's click here to invert the alpha matte. And there you have it. Now we can see the transparent character inside the triangle. With that, we're done designing the scene for the first animation part. Now let's move on to the next part, and start to animate this scene. See you there. But before you dive into the next lesson, I highly recommend that you take a 10-minute break. Get up from your chair, do some light stretching, and drink a glass of water. This will help you to recharge your brain for the next lesson. Hey, welcome back. Now we're going to learn how to create an animation in After Effects. The first thing we need to animate is the silhouette scaling from big to small. To make this happen, we gotta animate the scale property. So, let's select the layer and press S to see it. But don't do anything yet. Just listen to what I'm explaining. Don't worry, we'll do it together in a second. Let's say I want the layer to stay the same size at the beginning of the animation, which is at 0 seconds. Then, at second number 4, I want the layer to scale to a larger size. Okay, let's see what we've got. As you can see, nothing happened. We didn't create any animation. I'll press Ctrl Z to undo my actions. Nothing happened because I didn't indicate to After Effects from what size to what size the layer should grow. In order to signal to After Effects the change I want to happen to this layer, I need to create keyframes. Keyframes are markers used in After Effects to specify changes that we want to happen to a layer at a particular time. By creating keyframes, we can instruct After Effects to transition the layer from one state to another at different points in time. Essentially, keyframes allow us to create animation in After Effects. So let's see how to create keyframes. So first, I will bring the time indicator to the beginning of the timeline, that is, to the second number 0. And now you can do it together with me. Let's decide that at this point in time, at the second number 0, this layer should be very big. So let's change the scale value until we get the size we need. And let's move the layer here, because we want it to enter the scene from the character's head. Now, let's scale the layer a bit more. And once again, let's move it down a bit. To see what we are doing, we can turn on this layer for now. We need to enlarge and position this layer until the figure's head appears to cover the entire triangle. If it doesn't cover the whole triangle, then we'll see parts of it. And that's not what we want. Therefore, let's keep scaling the layer and moving it until we get the result we want. Let's just write 130 here. I think it's big enough. Then, move the layer here, so it covers the triangle shape. Let's turn it off, and check that we don't see the triangle. Yes, it looks good. And now, we need to signal to After Effects that the layer should appear and remain as it is at this moment. For that, we need to create the first keyframe at this point in time. To create the first keyframe, we can click on the stopwatch of the scale property. And now, let's move to the second number 2. Why exactly is second number 2? For no particular reason, just because I decided that the length of this animation would be 2 seconds. We can change it later whenever we want. Okay, let's get a little closer to our timeline from here. Now let's move here to see the second number 2. Place here the time indicator, and now let's change the values of the layer until it is centered. So, as you can see, as soon as we changed the scale values, a new keyframe was automatically created for us. Which is great. But the thing is that the layer is scaling down, but not in the right direction we need it to be. The reason for that is because it's scaling down based on the anchor point's position. Let me turn on the layer for now, so we can see what we're doing. In this situation, we need to animate the position of this layer along with the scale animation. This means we need to create keyframes for the position property as well. So let's go back to the beginning of the animation, that is the second number 0. And now, select the layer, and press Shift-P to open the position property along with the scale. And since we are good with the position of the layer at this point in time, we can create the first keyframe at this point in time, to keep it that way. Now, let's move the time indicator to the second number 2 while holding down the Shift key. This way, the time indicator will snap to the keyframes of the scale parameter. And now, let's move the layer here. Drag it up. And move it a bit to the side. Now, let's scale down the layer even further. Let's enter 15 for the scale. Then, let's adjust the position once again. And now, while it's getting smaller, the layer also moves to the right place. To see how it looks, bring the time indicator to the beginning of the timeline and press the spacebar key. Great! You have created your first animation. Let's set the preview screen to fit and continue with the animation. Let's move to the second number 4 and set this layer to return to the position and size it had at the beginning. For this, we can simply select these 2 keyframes, copy them using the shortcut Ctrl-C, and press Ctrl-V to paste them. They will adhere to the position of the time indicator. Alright, let's see what we've got. We can turn off this layer so that the alpha effect can do its thing. Then, let's check out the animation we made again. And if you're hitting the spacebar but nothing's happening, head on over to Preview. To change the settings here, we need to click on the Layers panel, so After Effects can know which composition you are referring to. And if you don't see the Preview panel, you can find it in Window. Alright, so let's select the Layers panel and change some preview settings. First, open the shortcut list and select Spacebar. Also, make sure to select the rest of the settings as I did. Alright, let's move on. Now I want to create a scale animation for the triangle as well. I want that at this point in time. At 2 seconds, the triangle will be the size it currently is. So let's stand at 2 seconds with the time indicator. Then, select the layer and press S to see the scale property of this layer. Now let's create keyframes with the current value. Once done, let's go to the second number 0 and change the value to 0. Next, let's go to the second number 4 and set the triangle to be of size 0 here as well. So now we have a slightly more interesting animation. When the silhouette gets small and the triangle gets big. Let's see how it looks all together. As you can see, the movement of these layers is a bit boring. Everything moves at the same speed. It's because our keyframes are currently linear keyframes. To make these keyframes a little more interesting, we need to convert them from linear keyframes to easy-ease keyframes. Easy-ease is a type of keyframe interpolation that helps you achieve smooth and natural-looking motion. When you apply easy-ease to a keyframe, it adds gradual acceleration and deceleration to the animation, making it appear more natural. To convert the keyframes, we need to select all the keyframes, right-click on one of them, go to Keyframe Assistant, and choose Easy Ease. Or use the very popular shortcut, the F9 key. Mac users, you need to hold the Fn key and press F9. This time, let's just click on it, and as you can see, our keyframes have changed shape. Let's see how it looks now. It's already looking better, and we can make it move even better by adjusting the easing. I'll explain what I mean. In After Effects, keyframes are points in time where you set a specific value for a property in your animation. Linear keyframes create a constant and consistent change from one keyframe to the next. This means the animation moves at a constant speed without any acceleration or deceleration. On the other hand, ease keyframes create acceleration and deceleration in the animation, making it more natural and visually appealing. And to control the speed of the animation, we can use the Speed Graph Editor. Speed Graph Editor is a tool that allows you to visualize and control the speed of your animation. It displays the speed of an animation property over time. By adjusting the handles in the Graph Editor, you control the acceleration or deceleration of the animation. An ease in creates a slow start, while an ease out creates a slow end. An ease in out combines both, creating a smooth acceleration and deceleration. And now I want you to pay attention to influence percentages down here. Imagine each handle as a pair of hands influencing the motion. Adjusting the handles closer to the keyframe increases their influence, creating a faster change. If you move them away, you decrease their influence, resulting in a slower change. But to change the influence of the animation using the Graph Editor and moving the handles can take too much time. Therefore, I want to show you a faster way to change the influence of animation. We can do it using the Keyframe Velocity panel. The Keyframe Velocity panel in After Effects provides a numerical representation of the velocity and influence of your keyframes. The panel shows separate values for incoming, ease in, and outgoing, ease out, velocities. The influence percentages we put here are the ones we saw earlier in the speed graph. If we want to create a nice ease in and ease out animation like we did earlier using the handles in the Graph Editor, we can change the influence of the ease in and ease out animation to 85. In the Speed Graph Editor, it will look like that. This means the animation will start slowly. Then, at second number 1 will increase its speed, and after that will slow down. The most important thing to remember is that we didn't change the duration of the animation. The animation lasts for 2 seconds, just like in the beginning. We just changed the timing between the keyframes by adjusting their influence. It's a process of trial and error, so don't hesitate to play around with different settings to see how they affect your animation. So, since we already converted our keyframes from linear to easy ease keyframes, we can now change the influence of these keyframes to get much more interesting movement. And to do that, first, we need to select the keyframes that we want to change. It's important to remember that we can't change all the keyframes for different types of properties at once. We need to change the keyframes for each property type separately. As you can see, in these 2 layers, we have keyframes for the scale property. Since it's the same type of property, we can select these keyframes in both layers and change them together. So let's select all the keyframes that belong to the scale parameter. Now, hold down the Alt key and click twice on one of the keyframes. And now we can see the Keyframe Velocity panel for the scale property. Let's change the velocity of these keyframes to 85% at the beginning of the keyframe and 85% at the end. Then click OK. Now let's do the same thing for the position property. We can select the keyframes from here, or select the property from the layer. This way, we will select all the keyframes that we have for this property. Now, hold down the Alt key and click twice on one of the keyframes. Now we can see the keyframe velocity panel for the position property. Let's change the velocity of these keyframes to 85% as well. Click OK, and let's see how it looks. Now, the motion of the layers is much more interesting. So, once we're done animating the first part, we can group these two layers together. Just like we do in Photoshop or Illustrator. But in After Effects, we call it pre-compose. Pre-composing is a technique used to group layers together and treat them as a single layer. One of the main advantages of pre-composing layers is that it allows you to keep your timeline organized and easy to manage. It's pretty easy to do. Just select the two layers, and either right-click and choose Pre-compose, or hit Ctrl-Shift-C on your keyboard. Let's give that a try. Let's press Ctrl-Shift-C together. And now, let's call this composition icon animation. Make sure both of these are selected, and then hit OK. Now we can see the composition we created in the composition panel and also in the project panel. To enter this pre-comp, double-click on it, and there are two layers that we animated a minute ago. Alright, let's go back to our main composition and turn off this pre-comp for now, so we can focus on creating the second part of this logo animation. We are going to create similar animation but with the letter A instead of the silhouette. To do that, let's go to the logo design composition. Select the letter A, hold down the Shift key, and also select the triangle. Now, press Ctrl-C to copy these layers. After that, navigate back to the main composition and press Ctrl-V to paste them. It is possible that the letter A may not be visible after pasting the layers. This could be due to the layer being stuck underneath the triangle layer. All you need to do is move the A layer above the triangle layer, and it will become visible. Now, let's select these two layers and center them in the composition. However, this time, we won't use the Align tool. We will use a cool shortcut, Ctrl-Home. Now, let's make these layers bigger. So press S to see the scale property for the layers, and change the value to 200, just like we did with the triangle earlier. And now, let's click here to see the collapse function and apply it to these two layers so that they are in their best quality. We can turn off the background to see what we're doing a bit better. And now, let's close the layers and start to animate the letter A. To start, move the letter down here. You can do it with the arrow keys on your keyboard. Then, click here to see the track matte function. And drag the pick whip of the triangle onto the letter layer to use it as an alpha. After that, click here to invert the alpha matte so that the triangle will use the letter layer as a cutout shape. Awesome! Now let's animate this scene. We will start by creating a scale animation for the letter A. So select it and press S to see the scale property. We know that the letter should be the size it is now later in the animation. Therefore, we can get to the second number 2 and create the first keyframe with the current value that is now. And now, let's get to the beginning of the timeline and scale the letter layer up to 500. We can drag the value manually, or just enter 500 here. Let's see how it looks. And now, let's animate this triangle layer, like we animated the first one earlier, using the scale property. So select the layer and press S. But this time, to create a slightly more interesting animation, we can choose the anchor point tool and move the anchor point of the triangle down here. Let's hold the Control key while moving the anchor point. That way, it will snap to this point. Once done, let's go back to the selection tool. And now, when we animate the triangle, it will grow and shrink in relation to its anchor point. OK, press Ctrl-Z, and let's stand at the second number 2. Because we know that at this point in time, the triangle should be the size it is right now. That's why we will create a keyframe here with the current value. Now, let's get to the beginning of the timeline and set the scale to 0. Let's see how it looks. And now, we can improve our animation even more by converting the keyframes to easy ease. So, let's select the keyframes and press F9. And now, let's also change the velocity of these keyframes, like we did before. And because all the keyframes belong to the same property, we can do it for all of them at once. So, let's hold the Alt key and double-click on one of the keyframes. Set it to 85, and click OK. Let's see it one more time. That looks great. And now, after finishing the animation of these layers, let's put them into pre-comp. We will use the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-C. This time, we will call it Animation. Make sure both of these are checked and click OK. Now, let's combine the two pre-comps we created. Turn on the first animated part, and let's find a good time to start the second one. We can turn off this pre-comp for now, to focus on finding a perfect timing. Okay, this seems like a good time point. Let's check it out. Now turn on this pre-comp, and move it to the time indicator position. Now move the time indicator back and forward, to see that the two parts blend well together. Let's continue doing that until we find a good timing. Alright, I think we should start the letter animation from the second number 2. Let's see what it looks like together. Yes, it looks great. Let's see it one more time. Awesome. Let's press Ctrl-S to save the project, before we move on to the next part, and start to animate the third scene, which is the animation of the rest of the letters of the logo. It's going to be awesome, so see you in the next part. Welcome back. Let's start to animate the third scene. So first, let's go to the beginning of the timeline, and turn off both of these layers. Now, enter the logo design composition and copy the layers of the letters from here. Select the first layer, hold the Shift key, and select this layer. Now press Ctrl-C to copy them. Next, go back to the main composition, and press Ctrl-V to paste the layers. Now, let's move the layers to the center of the scene. We can zoom in a bit. You can turn off the background so we can see what we're doing. The black color is too dark in this case, so let's change that. To change the background color of the preview screen, we need to access the settings of this composition. To do this, we'll use the shortcut Ctrl-K. And now, we see the settings of our main composition, which is called Logo Animation 1. And so we can see the changes that we are doing. Make sure to check the preview box down here. Now, let's click here and change the color to gray. Pick a brighter gray, so we can see the letters. Once done, click OK here, and here. And now, let's learn how to animate these letters. Let's start with the first letter, T. Let's turn off the other layers to focus only on the letter T. And now, to create the effect of exposing the letter, we need to start by creating a mask for the layer in the shape of the letter. We can achieve this by selecting the pen tool and creating the mask from top to bottom in the direction we want it to be revealed. This step is crucial as it will determine the direction of the letter's exposure later on. To begin, make sure that the layer is selected. Now, create a point at the top of the letter, followed by points along the way until you reach the bottom. To round the corners, click and hold on the pen tool to open its menu and select the vertex tool. Alternatively, you can hold the Alt key and click the point once to round the corner. Once done, adjust the handles to create a smooth curve. Next, create another mask for the remaining part of the letter. Start by creating the first point here. Now hold the Shift key to make the line straight, and create the second point by clicking at the end of the segment. After that, we need to apply a stroke effect on this layer. So let's open the Effect and Presets panel. If you can't see this panel, you can find it under Windows. And now, search for the stroke effect. This effect will help us create the reveal of the letter. So, select the stroke effect and drag it onto our layer. Now, if we open up the path parameters, you'll notice that the effect detects two masks on this layer, and we need to apply it to both of them. To do this, click on All Masks. Next, increase the brush size until the letter is no longer visible. Change the brush hardness to 100%. And now, we can animate the end property to create the reveal animation. And to get the reveal effect, we need to change the paint style to original layer. Now, when you change this parameter, the letter will be revealed. Alright, so now let's animate it. First, let's make sure that we are at the beginning of the timeline and create the first keyframe for the end property, with a value of 0. In order to see the keyframe we've created for the effect, we need to select the layer and press U. And there it is! We see the keyframes for the end property, belonging to the effect named stroke. That's exactly what we see here. Okay, now let's move to the second number 2, and change the value to 100%. Great, let's see what we've got. You might notice that some parts have an overlap where the two shapes meet, which looks bad. To fix this, we need to adjust the parameter that controls the stroke thickness. Moreover, we can animate this property as well. Let's set it to 2. Now go to the beginning of the timeline and create the first keyframe with the current value. To view the keyframe we created, press U. Now go to the second number 2 and adjust the value until the whole letter is visible. A value of 10 should work. Let's see how it looks. And now let's improve the animation. And we can do it by converting the keyframes to easy ease. So, the first thing we need to do is select all the keyframes and press F9 to make them easy ease. Then, we will change the velocity for the end property. So let's click on it twice, while holding the Alt key. Change it to 85 by 85, and hit OK. Let's see it once again. Awesome! And with this we have finished animating the first letter. Let's move on to the next one while repeating the same actions. First, let's start by creating a mask. So select the pen tool, pick the right layer, and start creating the mask. I want this letter to appear from this direction, so I'll start creating the mask from here. Create one point here, and one point there. And now, to create a new mask on the same layer, click on this layer first, and then start creating a new mask. Create the first point here, the second one here, another one here, then here, and the last one here. Lastly, to round the corners, hold the Alt key and click on the points you want to round. And then, adjust the handles to get a nice curve. We don't need to round this one. We can round this point, and adjust it a bit. You can hold the Shift key while moving the handles, to get a straight alignment. Okay, so the mask is ready, and now, instead of recreating the stroke effect, we can simply copy it from this layer. So let's select it. Now let's select the effect from here. Press Ctrl C. Then, select this layer, make sure we're at the beginning of the timeline, and press Ctrl V to paste the effect. Once done, press U to see the keyframes of the effect. So basically, we don't even need to create new keyframes for the effect. Let's see how it looks. Great, and now let's close this layer and turn on the next letter. Once again, choose the pen tool and create a mask. Remember, the first point you will create will affect the revealing animation. So if I want the letter will start to reveal from this area, I will start to create the mask from here. Now let's round the corners. Next, copy the effect from the previous layer and paste it onto the third letter. Just don't forget to go back to the beginning of the timeline before passing the effect. I think it looks good. Now let's turn on the next letter and repeat the same actions. A quick reminder, to start a new mask for this part of the letter, let's click on the layer once and continue creating the second mask. don't forget to round the corners. Okay, and now let's select this layer again and press Ctrl V to paste the copied effect on it. Finally, let's do it for the last letter. I want to reveal the letter from here, so I'll start to create the first point of the mask here. Now, to create the second mask for the second part of the letter, I'll click on the layer and start to create the second mask. And now let's round the corners. I'll move this point here a little bit. We can also round this point, and this one as well. Now, select the layer and press Ctrl V to paste the effect on it as well. I see that I didn't round the corners here. Let's do that now. We can also round this point. I'll move this point here a little bit. That's good enough. Let's see how it looks. Excellent. Let's press Ctrl S to save the project, then we can set the preview to fit and switch back to the selection tool. Now, let's select all the layers and add a scale animation to them. Let's go to the second number 2. And now, to create a scale animation, we need to open the scale property. So let's press S to see the scale for all the selected layers. We will create keyframes at this time point with the current value. Now, let's go to the beginning of the timeline and change the value to 0. And now, I want the letters to move to the left after the scaling animation. So I know that at the second number 2, I want the letters to stay where they are right now. Therefore, let's press P and create the first keyframes with the current value. Now, let's go to the second number 4 and move the letters to the left using the left arrow key on the keyboard. Hold down the Shift key while doing so to move the letters in bigger increments. Great! After that, let's enlarge this panel. Now, let's select all the keyframes and press F9 to make them easy ease. Then, hold the Alt key and double-click on one of the keyframes to enter the velocity panel. Change it to 85 on 85 and hit OK. Now, let's do the same thing for the scale animation. Let's press S to see the scale property. Select all the keyframes and press F9. Now, hold the Alt key, double-click on one of them, and change it to 85 as well. Just a quick reminder, if you want to see all the keyframes on the layers, press the U key. But we don't really need to see those keyframes right now. To hide them, we need to press the U key once again. Alright, let's check out what we've done so far. Great job! And now, we can nest all these layers into one pre-comp. So, let's make sure we are selecting all the letter layers, and then, press Ctrl-Shift-C. We can name this pre-comp Text Animation. Awesome! Now, let's start timing between the 3 animated scenes we've created so far. And we will do it in the next part. So see you there. Welcome back. Let's start to time and synchronize between all the animation scenes we created. First, let's move this layer forward in time to integrate it with the other animations we've created. Let's turn on the other layers. And so we can see what we're doing, let's turn on the transparent background. As you can see, we'll need to synchronize the animation of the letter A with the animation of the other letters. But before that, I want to show you how to organize the compositions we have in the scene. I'll show you what I mean. First thing first, let's turn off this pre-comp for now. And now, let's talk about this composition that we have in the scene, and learn how we can resize the dimension of this pre-comp. Because right now, if I move the pre-comp here, we can see that the boundaries of this pre-comp are the same as the size of our main composition. In other words, we have a lot of empty space that we don't really need. I don't want it to be so large. This means that we need to crop the unnecessary space that we have in this pre-comp. In order to do this, we need to enter it. And as you can see, we got all this empty and unnecessary space here. To get rid of it, we need to access the settings of this composition. For that, press the shortcut Ctrl-K. Now we can see the settings of this composition. We can now decrease its width. Let's try to find a good size for the width. Let's set it to 600. We can also reduce its height. Let's set it to 600 as well. Once done, click OK. Now, let's go back to our main composition, and we can see that the boundaries of this composition have now become smaller. And now, let's do the same for this pre-comp as well. So, the first thing we need to do is to enter the pre-comp. Now, press Ctrl-K, and change the dimensions to 600 by 600 here as well. Hit OK, and return to the main composition. And now, let's animate the letter A, and synchronize it with the animation of the letters. But first, let's animate the size of this pre-comp. At this point in time, at the 4-second mark, when the letter is fully in frame, let's press S and create the first keyframe with the current value. Now, let's move to the 6-second mark, and scale it down to 50. After that, let's select all the keyframes and press F9 to ease them. Then, hold down the Alt key, double-click on one of the keyframes, and change the velocity to 85 by 85. Great! The next thing we should do is to find the right moment in the timeline to start the animation of the other letters. So let's turn on this pre-comp. And now, I see that we need to animate the position of the letter pre-comp to match the position of the letters. But before that, we can adjust the size of the text pre-comp, because there is a lot of empty space in it. We will do it, just like we did with the other pre-comps. So let's do this quickly. Let's get inside it. And first, we can close the layers. Alright, and now press Ctrl-K, change the dimensions to fit the animation happening here. I think 1200 in width should work. And for the height, we can try 600. Maybe 300. That's better. Press OK, and return to the main composition. Now, let's go to the point in time when the letters finish their animation to see their final position. And now we need to adjust the text pre-comp and the letter pre-comp's position, because right now, they're not centered in the scene, and that looks weird. So, let's go to second 8, where the text finishes its animation. And now, let's try to find a good place for it in the scene. You can bring it down a bit. And now, let's time the animation of the letter A to the position of the other letters. So when the letter A finishes the scale animation, at second 6, let's create an animation for the position property, and move it to the left. Press P to see the position property. And now, we'll create a keyframe at this time with the current value, because up to this point, we want this pre-comp to stay where it is currently located. Now, let's move to the second number 8, and move it to the left while holding down the Shift key. Let's position it here. And we'll move this pre-comp here, so that this whole scene is in the center of the composition. We can move this pre-comp a bit to the right. Once done, select all the keyframes and press F9. Then, hold down the Alt key and double-click one of the keyframes to change the velocity to 85 by 85. Now, as you can see, the letters currently appear above the letter A. This means that the letters are where they're supposed to be at the end, but they weren't in the best starting position. So let's enter the text pre-comp and adjust their initial position. To see the position keyframes for all the layers, we need to select them and press P. Then, to change the starting keyframes, we must be right on them with the time indicator. Otherwise, if we move the letters around without standing on them, the animation will get messed up, since we'll create new keyframes. So, it's super important to stand on the right keyframes when we're changing them. To do that, we can hold Shift while moving the time indicator. This way, it will snap to the nearest keyframe. Okay, now let's change the position of the letters in these keyframes. Let's move all the layers to the right, using the right arrow key on the keyboard. Hold down the Shift key, so that the layers move in larger increments. Let's go back to the main composition and see how it looks. I think I moved them too much to the right. I'll go back to the composition and move them a bit to the left this time. Let's see how it looks now. It's already better. And now, we can move the time indicator to see the timing between these two precomps. I think the text should start to move after the letter moves. This means we need to move the text precomp a bit farther in time. Let's see that once again. In my opinion, it's excellent. But now I notice that the revealing animation of the text is happening too fast. Let's go into the composition of the letters and fix this. To do that, we need to find the keyframes of the effect we have on the layers. So first, we need to display all the keyframes of all the layers. To do this, let's select all the layers and press U. Now let's enlarge this panel. Here, we see the stroke effect and the two parameters we adjusted in this effect. Now, in order to slow down the animation that triggers this effect, we need to extend the duration of this animation. In other words, let's select the last keyframes of the effect and move them further forward in time. Let's place them at second number 4. Great! Now let's extend the animation for the reveal of all the layers. To do this, let's select the keyframes of the stroke effect in this layer. Hold down the Shift key and select the rest of the keyframes of the effect in the other layers. Now, let's drag these keyframes while holding the Shift key. This way, they will snap to the keyframes located at 4 seconds. Let's see how it looks now. I think it's much better. Okay, now let's close all the layers. To do that, we need to make sure we're not selecting any layer. You can click here or here. And now press the U key. Let's shrink the composition panel a bit. Now let's create an offset between the layers. In other words, let's make the letters appear one after the other, with a slight delay. Currently, they all appear at the same time. So let's select all the letters, except for the letter T, and move them 3 frames forward in time. Now, to unselect this layer, hold the Control key and click on it once. Great, now let's move these layers 3 frames forward in time. Now, hold the Control key and click on this layer once, to unselect it. And now, let's move these layers 3 frames forward in time as well. Let's do this again, and see how it looks now. I think we can increase the offset we created a bit. So, let's select these layers again and move them 2 more frames forward in time. Now, let's move only these layers 2 more frames forward. Let's do this for all layers up to the last one. Let's see how it looks now. I think it's better. Now, let's go back to the main composition and see how it looks with the letter A. Looks nice. And now, let's learn how to shorten the duration of the precomps we have in the scene. I'll explain what I mean. As you can see, the duration of this composition is very long. But if we enter it, we can see that the animation inside this precomp ends at second number 3. In other words, this whole section is really unnecessary because nothing is happening here. So, we can shorten the length of this composition up to the point where the animation ends. And in order to see where the animation ends, we need to see where the last keyframes are in these layers. Question: what is the shortcut key to view the keyframes on the layers? In order to see all the keyframes of all the layers, we'll make sure that no layer is selected, and then press the U key. Now we can see that the last keyframes are here, meaning the animation ends at this point in time. So let's stand here with the time indicator. Now, we need to trim the timeline or the work area to the position of the time indicator. We can do this manually like this, or use a shortcut by pressing N. Now, to cut it, we need to right-click on the work area and select Trim Comp to Work Area. Great! Now the length of this composition is 4 seconds. When we go back to the main composition, it seems that the length of this pre-comp has indeed been shortened. We don't need to cut this pre-comp, because we need to see the letter A until the end of the animation. The same goes for this pre-comp. Okay, now before we move on, let's zoom out on the timeline and press Ctrl S to save everything we've done so far. Now I want us to discuss a very important topic, which is how to modify the animation we've already created, in other words, how to change keyframes. And we will do that in the next part. It's going to be a super interesting lesson. But before you dive into the next lesson, I highly recommend that you take a 10-minute break. Get up from your chair, do some light stretching, and drink a glass of water. This will help you to recharge your brain for the next lesson. Welcome back. Let's learn how to adjust the keyframes. So, let's say I'm not satisfied with the last position of the pre-comp of the letter A. I want to move this pre-comp a bit to the left. If I select the layer at a random point in time, and then move it to the new position I want, I'll mess up the animation. If I press the U key to see the keyframes on this layer, I will see that an unnecessary keyframe is created at this point in time, at the point where I stand with the time indicator. And that's not what we want. This happens because we already have keyframes in the position property. Alright, I will delete this keyframe. And let's learn how to do it. So, in order to change the last position to where this pre-comp should be, we need to focus on the specific keyframe we want to change. In our case, it's this keyframe. So, we have to stand on this keyframe, and only then move the pre-comp to any other position we want. So now, when we are on this specific keyframe, we can press the left arrow on the keyboard, while holding down the Shift key to move this layer to the left. Now, let's adjust the position of the text pre-comp, according to the new position of the letter A. So select this pre-comp, and move it to the left. Let's see how that looks. I think we moved the letter A too much to the left. So, let's stand on the last keyframe once again, select this pre-comp, and only then adjust the position. Let's move it to the right a bit. And now, move the text pre-comp to the right as well. Let's see how it looks. Okay, now I see that the letters are moving too fast to the left. Pay attention to the text when I move the time indicator. It's colliding with the letter A. Let's change that. To do that, let's go into this composition. Now select all the layers and press P to see the position property for all of them. As you can see, the movement to the left takes 2 seconds. If we focus on just this layer, you can see that the animation starts at 2 seconds and ends at 4 seconds. In other words, the duration of this animation is 2 seconds. To slow down the animation, we need to move the last keyframes forward in time to make this animation last longer than 2 seconds. So, let's select all of these keyframes. And let's move the keyframes according to the animation of the last layer. It currently ends at the second number 4. So we need to move the keyframes to the second number 5. Hold the Shift key while doing this, to ensure that the keyframes snap with the time indicator's position. Great, and now let's go back to the main composition, to see how it looks with the letter A. I think we can start this pre-comp a bit earlier. So let's move it backward in time a few frames. Try adjusting the timing between pre-comps and check the animation to make sure it's what you want. I think we should start it from the 4th second. This is a regular working process in creating animations in After Effects. When we create an animation, we often have to make adjustments to the timing of each layer's keyframes until we are happy with the final result. For instance, at the moment, I think that the letter A stays for too long in the scene and needs to be adjusted. I would like the letter A entered the scene a bit earlier. For this, I will select all the keyframes on it, that is, the entire animation. Now I will find a time point that I think works, for example, at the 3rd and 15th frames. Now I'll move the keyframes here and see what I get. And now, because we've moved the animation of the letter A, we need to move the animation of the other letters accordingly. This means we need to move this pre-comp to a slightly earlier time point as well. For example, here. Let's see how it looks now. I like it. And now, it's time to create an exit animation for the logo. So let's get started. First, we need to select all the layers and place them in a single composition. Press Ctrl-Shift-C, change the name to Main Animation. Select both, and hit OK. Now, we need to create a background for our scene, using the background color from the original logo design. To achieve this, let's go back to the project panel, open the folder with the logo design layers, locate the background, and click on it to view its color. Next, we'll create a new background. In After Effects, we can create a layer called Solid for this purpose. To create a new solid, right-click here on the empty area in the Layers panel, go to New, and select Solid. Now select the eyedropper, and sample the background color from the design. And before clicking OK, we can change the name to BG, and ensure that the size of the solid matches the composition size. Then click OK. And there it is, we got a real background. Let's just bring it down. Now let's learn how to create this cool disappearing effect, as seen in the example. The first thing we need to do is create an adjustment layer. Adjustment layer is a special layer in After Effects that allows you to apply effects and adjustments to multiple layers simultaneously. Instead of applying the same effect to each individual layer, you can add an adjustment layer and apply the effect to that layer. The effect will then be applied to all layers below it in the layer stack. The benefit of using an adjustment layer is that it allows you to make global changes to your composition quickly and easily. So, after understanding what the adjustment layer is, let's create one, and see how it can help us to create the disappearing effect we need. In order to create a new adjustment layer, we need to right-click here, go to New, and select Adjustment Layer. Now, let's bring this layer to the top. You can close the folder now. And now, I will hide all the layers just to show you that the adjustment layer is an empty layer created in the size of our composition. On this layer, we can add effects and create a kind of filter that will affect all the layers below it. Okay, so I will turn the layers back on, and let's add the first effect to the adjustment layer. The first effect we will use is called Turbulent Displace. Drag it onto the adjustment layer, and start adjusting the parameters. You can see that it creates a wavy distortion on the scene. Let's tweak the parameters until we get something interesting. Let's start with the amount. I think we can set it to 30 for now. Next, in size, let's set it to 20. On second thought, let's set the amount to 60. Alright, and now, we can make it even more interesting by animating this distortion. And we can do it by rotating the evolution. But instead of animating his property manually, we can use an expression to make this rotate without creating a single keyframe. Expressions are a powerful feature that allows you to automate and control different aspects of your composition. Expressions are essentially small pieces of code that can be added to various parameters of your layers or effects. Expressions in After Effects can be created using JavaScript or the Extend Script language, and can be accessed and edited through the Expressions panel. In order to create an expression, we need to hold down the Alt key and click on the stopwatch of the property we want to animate. Now, a code line opens for us, in which we will write a very simple expression, time *100. To finish the action, click somewhere outside the expression box. Now, this parameter will rotate without us creating keyframes for it. And if you want this motion to be faster, you can change the time expression to 500. For this, click on the expression to open the expression line and change the number. I think is too fast. Let's set it back to 100. Now, let's move to the second number 10 and create an animation for the amount property. We'll set that at this point in time, the value will be 0, and create the first keyframe. Now, let's move to the second 16 and increase the amount to 100. Let's see how it looks. Great! We can now select all the keyframes and press F9 to convert them into easy ease keyframes. I think this animation is a bit too slow, so let's move the last keyframe to the second 14. Let's see it now. Looks good. Now, we can close the layer and add another effect called Fast Box Blur. So, search for the effect in the Effects panel and drag it onto the adjustment layer. Now, let's press U to see the keyframes of the previous effect and time the animation will create for the blur effect to match the animation of the previous one. Let's stand at this point in time and create the first keyframe for this effect with a value of 0. To see the keyframes we've created on the layer, let's press U once and then once again. There, we can see the keyframes for the blur effect. Now let's move to the 14th second and increase the blur to 30. Let's see how it looks. 30 seems a bit too much, so let's stand on this keyframe and change it to 10. That looks better. Now, let's select these keyframes and convert them to easy ease as well. Let's see how it looks. It looks excellent. We can close this layer now. Finally, we can label this adjustment layer. So select it, press Enter, and change the name to Blur Effect. Press Enter once again to finish the action. Now, let's find a good point in time to make the logo disappear. Let's say the logo will start disappearing at the second 10. To make it disappear, we need to access the opacity property for its pre-comp. To do that, press the T key. Now, create a keyframe at opacity 100. Then, move to second 12 and change the opacity to 0. Let's also ease these keyframes. Let's see how it looks. In my opinion, the logo disappears too early. Let's select these keyframes and start the disappearance from the second 11. Let's see it now. Let's try the second 12. I think that's better. Now, if we select the adjustment layer and press U to see its keyframes, it seems that the timing of the logo's disappearance matches the end of the effect animation, which is great. But I think we can increase the size of the distortion even more. Let's try 30. Looks great. And with this, we finished creating the animation, and we are ready to render it. Now, before we render the project, let's review everything we've created from the beginning to the end, to check for any glitches or errors. I noticed that the letter A is moving to the side in a weird way. Let's try to find the problem and fix it real quick. So, let's enter the main animation pre-comp. Now select the A animation pre-comp and press U to see the keyframes on it. Let's take a look at it again. You see, the letter A is not moving at the same velocity as the other letters. To check this, we can select the keyframes for the position. Hold the Alt key and double-click on one of the keyframes to access the keyframes velocity panel for this property. And there, we can notice that the velocity of this animation is different from our other animations. If you remember, we had set the velocity of all the keyframes of the position parameter to be 85 by 85 for all the letters. Let's make the same here as well. Now let's return to the main composition and check how it looks. Great! Now it seems like the animation is in the same motion. However, I think that the letters animation is a little too slow. Let's learn how to speed it up. So first, let's enter this pre-comp again. Now, enter the text comp. stand with the time indicator at the 4th second and move the last keyframes here. If you don't see the keyframes, you can select all the layers and press P. So let's move these keyframes to the position of the time indicator while holding down the Shift key. Now let's return to this composition and see how it looks along with the animation of the letter A. Looks good. Great, let's go back to the logo animation comp. And now, since we've shortened the logo animation, we need to make it disappear faster too. To do this, we'll select the adjustment layer and press U to see its keyframes. Then, we'll move all the keyframes to the 9th second. Now, let's reach the 13th second when the logo has vanished completely. And learn something cool you can do with After Effects. In After Effects, you can create markers within your composition to identify important points in the timeline. These markers are extremely useful, and I'll show you how to use them in the next part, so see you there. It's going to be awesome. Hey, welcome back. We're almost done with our animation. Let's check out some cool features and important notes to make sure we're all set for the final render. To begin, let's learn about markers in your project. Make sure that you haven't selected any layer before creating a marker. Markers can help us to create a note at important points in time. For example, we know that our animation ends here, at the second number 13. So I can create a note to myself that this is the point up until I need to render my project. And I can do it by creating a marker. For this, click on the small icon found here, on the right side of the timeline. Once you click it, a new marker will be created at the point in time where the time indicator is placed. Now, double-click on the marker and type End. This will help you identify where the animation ends. This step is optional, and you don't have to do it. But it's good for you to know about this cool function. Alright, and now let's move on to the rendering part. The first thing we need to do before rendering any project is to ensure we are not rendering unnecessary parts of the animation. For this, we need to shorten the work area to the moment when the animation ends. You can do this manually, or press the End key. As a result, After Effects will only render the scene up to the end of the work area. The next thing we must ensure before rendering is that all our designs are of the highest quality. We can achieve this by using the collapse function. So let's enter this composition and apply the collapse function to all the precomps and all the layers within those precomps. Because right now, if I zoom in, you can see that the objects in the scene are a bit blurry and not sharp. They are pixelated. Alright, let's start with the text composition. Move the time indicator forward in time to see all the layers. Now, click here to see the collapse function. And apply it to all these layers so we can see all of them at their highest quality. Now let's go back to the main composition and apply collapse to all the precomps. We don't need to re-enter and select the layers for the letter A and the character. We have already done that at the beginning of the lesson. But we do need to activate the collapse for this precomp. Then, activate the collapse for the rest of the precomps. And now, we can set the preview to fit, and make sure the animation still looks good after we collapse the precomps. Once we've done that, let's head back to the logo animation comp and apply the collapse there too. Click here to see the function and activate it. Now, let's take a quick look to ensure the collapse function didn't affect our animation. Everything looks good. Finally, we are ready to render the scene. So, to render the composition we are currently in, we can go to Composition and choose Add to Render Queue. Alternatively, we can use the shortcut Ctrl+M. Let's use the shortcut and press Ctrl+M. Now we are in the Render Queue panel of After Effects. Here, we can see which composition we are rendering, which is this composition. Now, in Output mode, we can select the file format we need. We will choose H.264, 40 Mbps, which is a high-resolution MP4 file. Then, we need to choose where to render the video. So click here, and let's find the folder that we created for this lesson. Let's choose to save it in the Renders folder. Now, make sure the name is good. The name that appears here is the same as the name of the composition we are rendering. Next, we can press Save. And finally, click on the Render button. Now let's wait a couple of minutes. Keep in mind that the animation's rendering time is not the same for everyone. Your computer's power is what determines how fast or slow it will be for you. Some of you may need to be more patient, while others might see it finish in no time. Once the render is complete, to see the render, we can either find the folder manually or click on the link here in the output mode. This will take us directly to the folder where the video is rendered. Let's open the video and see how it looks. Awesome work! You can now show off the animation you made on your social media platforms and your portfolio website. If you like the course, it would be awesome if you could give it a rating based on your experience. And don't forget to leave some feedback so I can know if you learned anything cool from the course or not. Alright, and now let's return to our project and learn how to render the animation without any background. This is useful when we need to integrate the logo animation into different backgrounds, or when we have a video playing in the background. Let's see how it's done. First of all, we can close this and exit the render panel. Now, let's go back to our main composition and turn off the background here. So, select the BG layer and turn it off. If you don't see the transparent background, and you do see the gray background, that's perfectly fine. This gray background is not real, it's just a preview screen background. So now, let's press Ctrl M again. This time, click here and change the format to QuickTime. Next, in the Format options, select Animation. And now, in Channels, we need to choose RGB plus Alpha. This tells After Effects to render this animation without a background, meaning with a transparent background. Now let's choose where to render the animation. Let's also render it to our renders folder. This time, add _alpha or _nobg at the end of the file name, so you can differentiate between the files. Now press Save and Render. Once again, let's wait a couple of minutes. Alright, let's see what we got here. Don't freak out if the video looks a bit choppy, it's just a file format thing. To check this video and ensure that it has been rendered without a background, we can drag it into our project. So first, we can go back to our logo animation comp. Now open the render folder and drag the MOV file into the project. Let's turn off all the layers. And there you have it! We got an animation without a background. And of course, you can also find the file in the project panel. And since we don't really need this file in the project, we can select it and press backspace to delete it from here. Let's also delete it from the project panel. And let's turn back on all the layers in our scene. You can also close this panel. And now, let's learn how to organize our project in the project panel before we close it. It's super important to keep your project organized in the project panel so that you can easily find everything. This will save you a lot of time when you return to work on the project later. Having an organized project is also essential when working with other animators. They'll need to access your project, and you want them to be able to navigate it easily. And if clients ask for the project file, it's much easier to share it with them when it's organized. So, we can organize our project by creating folders. Just like the folder that popped up when we imported the logo from Illustrator, and the folder that appeared when we created the solid and the adjustment layer that we have here in our composition. Alright, to create a new folder, ensure that nothing is selected in the project panel. Next, click on the icon to create a new folder. Now name it Assets, and press Enter to confirm. After that, drag all the graphic assets, including the folder with the logo layers, character layer, and solids folder, into this newly created folder. Now let's create another folder. When you're creating a new folder, make sure you don't select anything in the project panel. If you do, the new folder will be created inside the selected folder, which is not what we want. So, just double check that nothing is selected before you create the new folder. Alright, let's click here and name this folder Precomps. Now, let's drag all the precomps we created during the project into this folder, except for the main composition. We can tag the main composition with a different color from the other precomps. Next, let's put these two precomps into the folder. And this one as well. Okay, we're almost done here. Let's close all the precomps we opened and save the project by pressing Ctrl+S. You can also turn off the grid from the drop-down menu, or just hit the apostrophe key. And now, let's not forget to close the Illustrator files too. Now, we can close this After Effects project. That's it for our first lesson. Hope you had fun, and I can't wait to see you in the next lesson, when we will create a funky logo animation for a made-up YouTube channel for motion designers, and learn how to create an advanced stretch text animation. It's going to be awesome, so see you there. But before you dive into the next lesson, I highly recommend that you take a 10-minute break. Get up from your chair, do some light stretching, and drink a glass of water. This will help you to recharge your brain for the next lesson. Hi there! I hope you found the lessons helpful and learned some new and interesting things. To better remember everything we covered, I highly recommend practicing by completing this homework assignment. Your task is to recreate this cool animation. You have the freedom to change the colors and add any additional graphics you like. And whenever you face any issues or have some questions, feel free to check the AE project file to see the steps I took. Additionally, you can always reach out to me for help. Good luck!